Fantastic, thank you. So that's really helpful. Welcome to our applicant webinar for this funding opportunity on evaluating the benefits, costs, and utility of synthetic data. I'm just going to make a quick start with some housekeeping items before we actually get going. First, just to say that this meeting is being recorded, and we will be sharing the link for the benefit of anyone unable to attend. The use of your camera is entirely up to you. We'd love to see your faces, but we do ask that you mute yourself, please, just to avoid any difficult interruptions by unprepared sounds that are in our workplaces. There will be time after the presentations to ask questions, and you are also welcome to use the chat function or to raise your hands, and we will come to you. Just also to note that as we are limited in time, we will cover as many questions as we can, but please do email us at hub@adruk.org if we don't get to your question this afternoon, and we will get back to you. So we have several colleagues on the call today, and I'm going to start with a quick round of introductions. I'm Emily Oliver. I'm Head of Research and Capacity Building at Administrative Data Research UK, which is running this call, but we're also running it in conjunction with some other colleagues in ESRC. So I'm going to hand over to Richard Welpton to quickly introduce himself.
Okay, thanks, Emily, and hi everyone. So I'm Richard Welpton. I'm Head of Data Service Infrastructure at ESRC, and I'm also ESRC's rep on the UK Research and Innovation Digital Research Infrastructure Committee, which is part funding this call.
Thanks, Richard. And Shada.
Hi everyone, I'm Shada. I'm the Senior Public Engagement Manager, and I will be advising on one of the streams of this funding opportunity.
Thank you. Karina?
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm Karina. I'm a Grants Delivery Manager in ESRC, working with ADR UK to manage the delivery processing side of this funding opportunity.
Thanks, Karina. And Lizzie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Pattinson. I'm the Research and Impact Manager for ADR UK. I'm going to be helping Emily with supporting this call and answering any queries you may have.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. This is our agenda for this meeting. We're going to be covering the background and context of the call. We'll talk about the three complementary projects, including each of their outputs and objectives and outputs. Karina will talk through the application process, and we'll also touch briefly on the decision criteria that will be used. And then we'll open the floor up to you for questions. So I'm going to start by handing over to Richard, who's going to give a little bit of background and context to this call. Thanks, Richard.
Okay, thanks very much. So I mentioned that as well as being Head of Data Services at Economic and Social Research Council, I'm also our representative on UK Research and Innovation's wider committee to fund digital research and infrastructure. And this is a cross-council UKI initiative to fund fund the next generation of digital research infrastructure. If I could move on to the next slide, please. So DRI was put about a couple of years ago to think about how UKI and how all the councils could contribute together to fund digital research infrastructure for the rest of this decade and beyond. This isn't just about ESRC, which is a long history of funding digital research infrastructure. This is about working with colleagues from MRC, the Engineering Research Council, Natural Environment Research Council, etc. All seven, eight of our research councils working together to fund digital research infrastructure over the next few years. We have a programme of work which you can see at the bottom of this slide, split into 5 thematic areas: data infrastructure, large-scale computing, secure services, skills and career pathways, and foundational tools, techniques and practices. Now, under the secure services, you'll see that part of what we're trying to do as a combined UKRI effort is think about the next generation of trusted research environments. And the basis for this call came about because one of the things that we know about trusted research environments is that they are pretty expensive to set up and also to maintain. And we got thinking that synthetic data probably has a role to play in supporting access to sensitive data in trusted research environments. And that's why that's part of the reason why this call came about. It also happened that ADI UK has been doing some work around synthetic data too, and so we've joined forces with Emily's team to launch this call. Not sure if there's a next slide there, Emily.
I think the next one is just is over to me again.
Over
Thank
to
you.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Richard. So now just onto the vision of this call. There are many reasons why we want more synthetic data to be available to researchers. And Richard sort of talked a little bit there about the context, but more broadly, perhaps from our perspective, it can allow for code to be developed and tested outside the secure environment. It can be used for training new users of the data. It can also be used to improve potentially the quality of applications to use the data, thereby making a number of efficiency savings by those involved in granting data access. But while we have multiple methods and publicly available tools to create synthetic data, we also do have a handful of low fidelity synthetic administrative data sets. We do not currently have evidence on the costs and benefits to different stakeholders. We do not have clear and consistent governance around the creation, storage, and use of synthetic data. We don't have clear and consistent access arrangements. We don't have consensus on terminology or public engagement in the synthetic data conversation. And we're very short on use cases. So if we are to scale up production of synthetic data and make it more routine, we need evidence that it will add value and that it would be acceptable to the public and to other stakeholders. So that's really what this call is about. It's about trying to get that evidence together. The total funding available is £375,000 at full economic cost, and this will be split 3 ways to support the 3 projects. Each project will focus on one of the 3 groups of stakeholders, that is researchers, data owners and trusted research environments, and the public. Each will only be funded once, although you may apply for more than one of the 3 projects, and you would then talk about how you would combine the research objectives in your applications. I'm afraid that if you do decide to apply for more than one, you do still need to make separate applications for each one. The successful award holders will be required to work collaboratively with each other at particular stages of the project, especially towards the end when you're writing your recommendations. In the funding call, sorry, I'm just going to let some more people in who are waiting. Are they? Sorry, Lizzie, maybe you've done that. You've done that. Great, thank you very much. So in the funding call, we flagged a number of data sets that we would like applicants to reference in their applications as ones that they will look into. The ones that we've named are ones which we have particular interest in, as they've either been used or they will be used by researchers using ADR UK flagship datasets. So the top 3 listed here, the annual survey of hours and earnings, grading and admissions data for England, and the criminal justice datasets. These ones are ones that have been created to support ADR UK research already. Hospital episode statistics was created earlier this year by NHS England, and is also a component of the eChild linked dataset, which we have funded, and of other datasets that we are either working on at the moment or are available. The National Pupil Database is one of the most secure administrative datasets, one of the most used secure administrative datasets, and is also of huge interest to ADR UK. We know that synthetic NPD and longitudinal education outcomes, LEO, are in the pipeline, and we would expect them also to be included in this study. We're also interested to hear about other synthetic data sets which are held in secure settings, which could help us to explore these insights. But I do want to make clear that creating synthetic data is not the focus of this funding call. Apologies, I've just realised I've got the slides in slightly the wrong order. There we go. So we're now going to quickly run through the 3 projects in the call so that you can be clear about exactly what we're looking for in each one. First is the project looking at the perspective of the researcher. So here we're looking at the benefits, costs and utility of low fidelity synthetic data for researchers. Here we would expect you to delve into the researcher experience. Does it help the researcher to understand the data in advance of applying for data access? Does it improve the quality of their application for access? And does it allow them to develop and test code outside of the secure environment? Is the remote execution model a viable one? We would expect to see a mixed methods approach to this, drawing on qualitative responses to surveys or interviews with the researchers, as well as some quantitative analysis on, for example, the impact that the availability of synthetic data has on the success rate of applications to use the real data. The outputs for this will be an evaluation report and some recommendations for future provision. And the output evaluation will also need to be to collaborate with the other 2 projects to make sure that there's some alignment with their findings. For project 2, we would similarly be looking for a mixed methods approach. This one is looking particularly at the perspective of data owners and trusted research environments. Here we've broken the objectives down a little bit for this one, and would like applicants to consider the range of costs that are incurred by data owners and TREs when a synthetic data set is made available. The different methods of sharing it with researchers, and the efficiencies or not of doing so. We know that there are quite a lot of concerns from data owners about creating synthetic data sets, for example, around the governance. There isn't, as I mentioned before, any sort of consistency around governance of synthetic data. And that would be one of the issues that would perhaps be looked into by this project. Again, the output would be an evaluation and recommendations for scaled production and sharing. And again, there would need to be collaboration with the award holders of the other two projects. So now I'm going to hand over to Shada, who is going to talk about Project 3.
Thanks, Emily. Just a little bit of context before we dive into Project 3, as it's slightly different to the other two. For those who are looking to apply for this funding opportunity, public engagement is at the core of the work that we do at ADI UK in order to demonstrate trustworthiness and maximise public benefit. As Emily mentioned earlier, to date, as far as we are aware, there has been no large-scale public consultation on synthetic data, although it has been briefly explored in a small number of public engagement exercises within ADI UK, most prominently in May of this year, when our ADR Scotland partners put some questions to their public panel. They explored what synthetic data is, its use, and ADR Scotland partner Research Data Scotland's approach to using synthetic data, creating synthetic data. The results of this engagement echoed the other public engagement exercises that have taken place, in that it really highlights the need to further explore public understanding and acceptability of synthetic data. So for this project, the aim is to run a consultation with the public to inform policy and processes, for instance, on guidance for data owners and funding bodies, and for the consultation to be a source of information for others looking to make use of synthetic data more broadly. So what does that actually look like? We've got the objectives there on the screen. So to design and run a public consultation to include understanding concept and terminology. Synthetic data is what we refer to synthetic data, but artificial data and other types of terminology have been used to describe synthetic data. So it's getting public perceptions of what they understand these terms to mean. Understanding the potential uses of synthetic data, so for instance for training or coding, to get public perceptions on how they feel around its creation and its storage. Public perception of risk is quite a large thing that we are quite interested in finding more about. Public perceptions around the governance of synthetic data, and lastly, public messaging. How do we talk about this? Although synthetic data is still sort of relatively new, it's growing, and more people are starting to use it. So it's very important that we understand how we talk about it, more generally. So the output will be, as with the other projects, an evaluation and recommendations for the scaled production and sharing of synthetic data. And as Emily mentioned with the other project streams, this will have to be in collaboration and informed by the other projects. The last thing we want is a final report of recommendations that cannot be used alongside the others. Next slide, please. So I've already done a little bit of scoping work on what something like this could look like. And as a result, I will be available for support and oversight of the project. We also have a stakeholder group that represents Smart Data Research UK, which is another UKRI investment. Dare UK, which is another UKRI investment, Future Data Services, again, part of UKRI, Research Data Scotland, and NHS England. We also have a public engagement steering group who are available and have representatives across all the 4 nations who can provide guidance and insights to how this project is developed. The outputs will include a series of workshops with the same members of the public. The intention for this is to allow for the building of knowledge, deliberation, and the drawing of conclusions, thematic analysis of the discussions, a final report of the consultation, and practical recommendations. So you'll note that the sort of conditions for this project don't make it a data science project, but more a qualitative project that is best suited for someone who has a background in public engagement and qualitative research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shada. That's great. So just to move on briefly to funds and eligibility, I've mentioned the funding amount that's available. Please note that we are planning to divide the full amount by across the 3 projects. We've given an approximate 3-way split there just as a guide, but if you feel that your project needs slightly more or less than that, then please do sort of factor that in. The 3 amounts don't have to be exactly equal across the 3 projects. Please also note that projects are expected to start quite promptly in March 2024 and to last a year. And that's because of restrictions on the funding that we have obtained for this particular project. So we will expect a report to funders within 12 months. And it might be that there are still some loose ends to tie up after that period, but the expectation is that this project will broadly last about a year, and that the bulk of the funds will be spent by March 2025. ESRC has the same eligibility criteria as the rest of UKRI, so please do check that you're eligible before you apply. We are open to partnership approaches, and we do have some rules around project co-leads from government, from industry, from business, and from third sector. And that is possible to be a co-lead from one of those sectors, but my understanding is that the cost of that cannot be more than 30% of the total budget allocated to you. So please just bear that in mind. I am going to hand over to Karina in just a second, but I'm just going to stop sharing a moment to get a different slide deck up for that so that I've got the right slide for her. So a quick pause while I just do that. Is that sharing happening? Got a feeling it's not.
We can see it, Emily, but you need to make it full screen.
Apologies. Is that better?
Perfect.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Karina.
Thanks, Emily. So I'm quickly going to talk about the process about how to apply for this funding opportunity. Some of you might already be aware that UKRI is transitioning their funding service. So we're transitioning away from GES to the new funding service, which I'll refer to as TFS. You might be happy to hear that this service is a lot more user-friendly, at least we hope so, and a lot cleaner and more enjoyable to use than GES was. So for this funding opportunity, you won't be able to apply on GES. You'll have to apply using TFS. To do that, you would go to the funding finder page for this funding opportunity, and there'll be a link that will take you to TFS where you can start your application. If you've not used TFS before, which I assume most people here haven't, you'll need to create an account. It's fairly simple. You'll select your research organization from a drop-down menu. If your RO is an eligible institution, then it will be available to click to choose from. And you'll then carry on setting up your account as you would typically do so, using your email address and setting a password and so on. If your organization isn't included as one of the eligible ROs and you're not able to select it from the drop-down menu, there is an additional step, and so it might take you a little bit longer to create your account. So if that's the case, please email the support email address on this slide here, and also just allow yourself a little bit more time for that to process. Now, once you're able to log in, you can start your application. There will be assessment criteria, which will include a question underneath, and underneath that you'll be able to insert all of the information into a text box, which each text box will have a word count, so please just bear that in mind. The assessment criteria for this funding opportunity are fairly standard, so you'll be asked to complete a summary, vision, approach, include project partners, all of that kind of standard information that you typically would do. The only thing I would note is some of the wording might be slightly different on TFS to what you're already used to. For example, with JES, you would submit a justification of resources, and with TFS, there will be an assessment criteria that's called resources and cost justification. So it's only slightly different. There's just that little nuance. So don't be surprised if you see that some of the terminology is different. For example, we're not using the term PI anymore. So principal investigator. Using TFS, it'll be the project lead. So do just bear that in mind when completing your application. And a note on the system, you can save your answers at any point. You can save your application at any point. You can work offline, and you can come back to your application at any point to complete your application. So once you've completed that, we suggest that you save the application in read-only view and take a look at it in that view before you send it to your research office, just so you can spot any mistakes or any sort of formatting issues that you might want to fix before sending that to your research office. Once that's sent to your research office, they will do any final checks that they need to do before they submit it to us. Now, do just bear in mind that the deadline is the 26th of October, and that's the deadline for your research office to submit the application to us. So do give them enough time to do that before the deadline. Also included some, the new funding service have published a series of webinars about TFS. So if you'd like any more information about how to use TFS, we've linked to those webinars. They've also created some short, really easy to follow videos on exactly how to use TFS, which we've also linked on the slide. So do feel free to look at those if you feel like you need any more information. And the last point is, if you need any help at all with the system, please email the support email address at the top. That's a central contact for any issues that you might have with TFS. So they'll be able to help you if you need it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karina. That's fantastic. The funding service is new for all of us. We're all sort of finding our way a little bit with it. So do bear with us, and of course do use that support email address if you need to. So I'm just going to quickly talk a little bit about the funding decision criteria. Funding decisions are based on similar criteria to other ESRC funding calls, With each application, our independent expert panel will be looking for scientific excellence in your methodology, confidence in your delivery based on your experience and your approach to the objectives of each project, including timelines and budget, your plans for collaboration and engagement across the projects and with various stakeholders for each one, and also value for money. Please note that while project 3 is specific to public engagement, we would expect to see reference to public accessibility and acceptability of proposals for all 3 of the projects. The independent expert panel will grade your applications, and the final decision on who is successful will be made by senior strategic leads in ESRC and ADR UK. And we do send individual feedback to all applicants. So the next steps are set out here in terms of the timeline for the work that you need to be aware of. I mentioned before that the funding lasts for 12 months and that we need the bulk of the funds to be spent by March 2025. The application deadline, as Karina pointed out, was the 26th of October. Our panel will be reviewing your applications in November and we'll meet in December. And we hope that decisions will be made either at the end of December or in early January 2024. And we will communicate that decision as soon as we can. That is it in terms of our presentation. We've given you an awful lot of information. All of the information, I hope, is covered within the documentation for the funding opportunity, so please do refer to that for further detail. We'll also share the slides from this presentation with you, and the recording should also be available in due course. But now's the chance for us to answer any questions that you have, so I will stop sharing. And we will take questions. Great, thank you. So the first question seems to be Christian. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm Chris Arnold. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, amazing. I have a question regarding project 1, if that is okay. So how much room is there for conceptual development of the utility of low fidelity synthetic data? Or because you seem to have a fairly empirical focus on these things. And regarding the definition of utility that you already, do you have things already in mind? Like, for example, the success rate of applying to access for real data? Would that data be provided by you for that call in case this is something that you are interested in?
So yeah, good question. I mean, I think what we've set out in the call documentation is some broad ideas about what we expect to be covered, but we don't claim that we've identified all of them. So I think if there are other implications for researchers, we'd love you to talk about those, and we would hope that more would be uncovered by doing the research. We know that from our own example, but from our own experience, that where we have provided some synthetic data available, for example, the on our data first data sets, which are the criminal justice ones, we've had research fellows who have been using that data. It takes a little bit of time to get hold of, and the Ministry of Justice created quite a basic 1,000 line synthetic data set, and just from asking them what they thought of it, they just found it really useful just to kind of find their way around the data while they were waiting to get their hands on it. So quite a basic, improvement in their experience just by having something quite straightforward to use. But in that instance, it was quite easy for them to get hold of. The Ministry of Justice knew that they were applying for that data set. They knew that these were bona fide researchers who were being funded through us and so on. So there were kind of perhaps other considerations that made it particularly helpful for the researchers in that instance. But I think if there are other ideas that you have or things that researchers come up with, absolutely that's what we need to hear. We need to get a big picture of what the experience is like. So yes, I would say think about it broadly and certainly present ideas for what you would expect to explore in your application. Thank you. Heather.
Hello, sorry, my camera is not working today. So my question is around Project 3. And I guess I'm not sure if you're aware that NIHR had a call out that closed in August looking at the public acceptance of linked data. And so there's some similarities with this call, and we put in for that to do lots of engagement work with communities that typically didn't engage with the kind of data engagement process, because there's lots of gaps in obviously who participates in any of the public engagement events. So I was wondering, when we apply for this, if we could piggyback on this other proposal, because obviously that one was £500,000 and this is significantly less money. So just saying that because we were putting in to do kind of creative methods around engagement, so we could work with more and different types of people. So it's basically doing immersive theatre around engagement, so people understood the processes better. Is that the type of thing that we're looking for, that you're looking for with this call?
Thank you for your question, Heather. Yes, I am aware of that. We did a public dialogue last year looking at public perceptions of public good use of data for research and statistics. I really like the sound of that approach on both engaging people who aren't often engaged in the data space, but also doing it in a creative and unconventional way. In terms of piggybacking, I can't really answer that question. I think that's a question that Emily or Karina may need to answer, or we may need to take that and come back to you. But one thing I will say, having led public dialogue we did last year, our focus was around administrative data and statistics. And we did find that after engaging with 68 members of the public for full day workshops, in person and online, that it's still a very, obviously, yeah, we engaged in workshops. We didn't use the sort of immersive theatre or creative, we weren't any more creative than like games and sort of ways that we thought we could do it. But we still had a few people who finished the workshop not quite fully, who didn't fully understand still what we meant when we were talking about data. And while that workshop had brought forth a lot of very, very, very rich insights, there's so much deeper that we could have gone, which is why for this consultation we're keen to see the same group of people engaged multiple times. And the only reason I'm sort of flagging this up now is because if you're going to add the concept of synthetic data along with the discussion of real data, I just worry that maybe that's too much. The other thing to just consider is if it's an NIHR project, will your focus only be around health data? Because sort of perceptions around health data are sometimes a little different depending on the context to other types of data. So I think there's just a few things to think about. But in terms of piggybacking off of that, I'm just going to pass up to you, Emily, to see if you can comment on that. Otherwise, maybe we take it back and get back to you.
Thanks, Jada. Yes, I will take this one away. I suppose the only answer I can give at this point is that I think we would want to make sure that any grant that we offered wasn't dependent on another grant, if you see what I mean, from elsewhere. So I'm not quite sure how the timing of these work out, but we would want to be sort of confident that this one could go ahead, whether or not the other project was going ahead. And otherwise, in terms of what Shada was saying about the breadth of synthetic data sets that we would want you to be looking at, I think that's absolutely right, that we wouldn't just want it to be focused on one particular discipline or theme or topic area. So I will take the question away, unless Karina has anything more to add on piggybacking. No. Okay.
Not Emily, but I think we should take the question away and think of what else we could add to that.
Thank you. Does anyone else have questions? Or is there anything else that isn't clear or you'd like us to say again, or? Christian.
I don't want to take away time from others since I had a question already, but just to refine, so the success rate to applications when people had access to synthetic data, is that data that you have that sort of could be made use of for a project, or would you expect a project to collect such data?
We would expect a project to collect such data. We don't. I don't know if that exists. I don't know if even how possible it would be, but I think it would be and it might be about asking that question in different ways. It might be about engaging with, for example, the research application panel, who accept projects or not, and perhaps interviewing them and getting some insight from them. It might be that there is some quantitative data somewhere that could give us some insights about that, but it's certainly not something that we have at the moment. So we would expect that to be included if the researcher was to look at that. Thank you. Joanne Thompson.
What of like the life course of women's mental health data, is that sort of in the bracket of what you're looking for? My project's sort of like it's like a books to website process, and I'm collecting a database of all women and girls mental health data from the grassroots, sort of up to bring all the services together under one roof. So is that kind of database that kind of you're going to be looking for?
I think it is. So what we're particularly looking for is where there are synthetic data sets that have been made for data that is otherwise secure and difficult to access. And the reason the synthetic data set exists, well, or perhaps more accurately, the fact that it exists makes it easier to explore that topic before you get access to the real data. So if that data set that you're mentioning falls into that category, then yes, that would be fine. Richard, I don't know if you've got any more to add to that from your perspective.
No, not from me. No, I think you've covered that. Thanks, Emily. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just going to quickly check on the chat.
Yeah, speaking of the chat, I was just looking at it too, and I can see your message in there, Heather. I think if you can sort of justify, you know, why you're choosing to engage with those networks, or how you've developed them, and why you think that you know, those groups would be worth engaging with for the project, then yeah, I mean, absolutely. For the dialogue that we did last year, we were very keen to engage with people that aren't normally engaged with in research. So I think it would be a very good thing to see. But yeah, thank you for the last sentence of not covering everything in the workshops. Absolutely.
Excellent. So thank you very much for engaging with us today and joining our webinar. I've just gone back to the poll that we put out at the beginning, which some of you were able to respond to, and it's a fairly straight split, actually, 4 ways of people who are interested in each of the 3 projects and people who are not sure yet. So that's good. That means that we tapped into the right audience for this webinar, which I'm very pleased about. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you have further questions. As I mentioned before, we will be sharing the recording, and we will also send all the slide deck to you all as well. And I think we'll wrap it up there, unless anyone's got any last minute questions, or if anything else isn't clear. Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.